Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today I'm going to be discussing 10 NHL players who will be traded in 2021. Now last year we saw some movement, but not as much as we expected. A lot of that was due to the pandemic and just crazy stuff happening. But in 2021 there will be a lot of creative and different moves because of the pandemic, and also a lot of big name players will likely move because of the fluidity that we've seen. But who do I see as the biggest players that will be traded in 2021, and who do I see as the most likely players to be traded as well next season? Watch till the end for all my picks and all the big trade announcements, and hit that big red subscribe button if you are new. 70% of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed, so join the Grav gang and join us on the road to 27K. And I truly do believe that in this 2021 season, and especially in the offseason with this expansion draft, that we're going to see some insane moves and moves that pretty much come out of nowhere. So watch till the end for all the different picks. But basically a year ago, I made this video, but it was 10 NHL players I'll be traded in 2020. That was really the first video that ended up exploding on the channel. So thanks so much for everybody that watched that video and are still watching here today. But we're going to now go on to the first player that will be traded in 2021, and this is a little bit obvious since I'm wearing the Vegas jersey and you can see him behind me. The first player we're going to be talking about today is, Max Pacioretty. And I will say, Max Pacioretty is probably the most obvious pick for this list, but I still see him being traded in 2021. As we saw with Vegas, they were really hell-bent on trading him this past month, and there was a lot of different rumors about Pittsburgh, about all these different teams. That didn't come to fruition, but I feel like after this 2021 season, if Max Pacioretty has another down year, let's say, then I could see that happening. But still at the same time, in my opinion, as a person that watches a lot of Vegas games, they need as many goal scorers and as many finishers as possible, at least this last season where they really struggled for that. Sure, Max Pacioretty wasn't that true sniper, especially in the playoffs that they needed, but during the regular season, he was still pretty great for them. Got 66 points, 32 goals, and 71 games played. That's a super valuable player for a team like Vegas that has a lot of playmakers, a lot of passers, but not a lot of guys who can truly put it in the net. And again, in the playoffs, he was not that great, but I still think for Pacioretty, he's a valuable asset to keep on. He has 3 more years on his contract at $7 million, so yes, he is a pretty hefty paycheck to have to pay every single year, but at the same time, for a team like Vegas that needs those goal scorers, I'm not really sure what they accomplish in getting rid of Max Pacioretty. Now, I think the main reason why we didn't see a Max Pacioretty trade was just because of that cap hit. He has $7 million on his deal, and not a lot of teams can take that type of contract right now, at least in this landscape, at least not yet. But maybe next season, if he has the same type of year, I could see a lot of teams being interested. First, I have the Arizona Coyotes, who, if they're able to get rid of the Demers and Goligoski contracts, who I think both end after next year, will have quite a bit of cap space to work with. They could definitely use some more goal scoring as always, and a true sniper in Max Pacioretty I think would be a pretty great fit. I think I would also lump in the Boston Bruins on the teams that would be interested. Now, I think they would be interested, but making a deal is a different story. They would still have some pretty big cap issues, I think, next year, but unless they get rid of a couple of decent names, then maybe Max Pacioretty fits in, especially on that power play. But I also have the Buffalo Sabres, who will be interesting in the next year or so, because if they're able to make the playoffs, then that's truly different. Maybe Taylor Hall resigns there, and they would also still have quite a bit of cap to get a guy like Max Pacioretty especially. And now we can move on to the second NHL player who will be traded in 2021, and especially with the moves that I think Calgary has made this season, I think this is even more obvious to the direction they're trending with this player, that being American defenseman Noah Hanifin. I've kind of been on the Noah Hanifin train for a while, and I've been willing to give him a lot of chances in Calgary, because in Carolina it was kind of like, alright, he's not getting the most ice time, and he's on the Carolina Hurricanes, which back when he was playing for them, they were not that great, but now he's on the Calgary Flames. We'll see what happens. He hasn't been good, though, and especially this last season, I think has had one of his worst years in the NHL. Got 22 points in 70 games, 5 goals, 17 assists, but I wouldn't look at the points when it comes to Noah Hanifin, because just on the ice, you can see the potential there. But it seems like every single game he's making this dumb decision and making this dumb play, and I've kind of just had enough. And I think Calgary this season is really the big one, because he is still pretty young. He's 23 years old right now and will be turning 24 in actually next January. So he does still have some time, but if this next season, if we don't see substantial improvement, I think Noah Hanifin is absolutely out the door. And I think the main reason why I see that is because of the acquisition of Chris Tanev. I think Chris Tanev kind of makes Noah Hanifin's role a little bit more obsolete. Even if Noah Hanifin develops into a great defensive player, Chris Tanev looks to be the guy, especially on that penalty kill, and that leaves Noah Hanifin as a guy that's just kind of on that top four, kind of just playing some minutes, and still at this point, not playing that great. And one of the other reasons why I see Hanifin being traded is that contract as well. He makes $4.9 million for the next 4 seasons, and that's a pretty bad contract for Calgary to have, especially in the position where they're in, where they want to truly contend and add some pretty major pieces. And now we can go on to the third player who I think will be traded in 2021, and this is probably one of the bigger hot takes I have in today's video, but I do see it happening. That being for the Carolina Hurricanes. They will trade winger and Swiss stud Nino Niederreiter. To me, Nino Niederreiter is a fascinating player, a guy that in his first year in Carolina was just brilliant, especially offensively, where it seemed like he was really unlocking the potential he had. He was always a great defensive player, especially for the Minnesota Wild, but that offense was really key. This last season, though, was just not as effective. In 67 games, got 11 goals, 18 assists for 29 points, but he's still a player that likely has a lot of trade value on the market. He's 28 years old, right winger, and once again, Swiss stud, and has the makeup of a guy that can be great offensively while also having the pedigree of a great defensive player. The problem is, Carolina's likely not going to be able to keep him. He has $5.2 million on his deal, but only for this season and the season after that. This might be a player that they just end up letting go, maybe even to Seattle. Maybe they trade him to Seattle to just make them take him and just let that be. But especially with Carolina's recent acquisitions of guys like Jesper Fast, they're really loaded on the wing. And even though Niederreiter I absolutely love and I think they should keep overall, if he has another iffy season, another rough season like he had in 2020, this is a player that could get phased out by Carolina. Now, I'm not sure how many teams would actually be in on him, especially if he has another rough season, but his deal is still pretty good, and he might be a guy that maybe Carolina keeps until the 2022 season. Maybe they trade him for maybe a defenseman in 2022. That's looking ahead a long time, but I think Niederreiter is a guy that will likely be phased out by Carolina, a guy that likely won't be a part of that core for too much longer, and a guy that might need a change of scenery again to another NHL team. And now we're going to go on to the fourth player that I think will be traded in 2021. And the first goaltender on this list I have from the LA Kings veteran goalie Jonathan Quick. I think 2021 is really the first season, or really the season, that we'll see Jonathan Quick actually traded. He has 3 more years on his contract at $5.8 million, and that is a pretty hefty deal, but I think we will see this deal after the 2021 season. And I think Jonathan Quick will be an interesting asset because he likely will have a diminished role with Cal Peterson likely as the starter next season and the full-time guy, which leaves Jonathan Quick with some more work room, with less games played, which will definitely help with his age, and could have a pretty decent season on a look-to-be improved LA Kings defense with Olli Maatta. I think Jonathan Quick could definitely raise his value next season, and I think that's what he'll try to do, get away from that LA Kings team and try to win another cup while he's still in the NHL. And after the 2021 season, he'd be in the offseason. He had 2 more years in his contract, and still it would be a lot of money, but LA could definitely retain some contract on that deal, or some money on that deal, and I think a lot of teams could definitely want him as a guy that's won 2 Stanley Cups, has led 2 teams to the Stanley Cup, and has a lot of veteran leadership. So we'll see what happens, but I think Jonathan Quick, especially to a team that needs a solid backup, just for the kind of short term, kind of like how New Jersey with Corey Crawford ended up getting him, I could see a deal like that happening. Probably not at the $5.8 million contract cap hit, but if they do retain some salary, a deal I think could happen, especially after the 2021 season. Now we're going to go on to another goaltender here, and I'm a Dallas Stars fan, and this might be the biggest hot take I have in today's video. So just keep that in mind. This probably won't happen, but in an alternate universe where something kind of crazy goes in the 2021 season, I could see this happening. And it revolves goaltender Ben Bishop. He has 3 more years on his contract at $4.9 million, and I want to say this right now, that it's not likely that Ben Bishop gets traded, but if he has a rough season in 2021, which with his 34-year-old age could definitely happen, I could see the Dallas Stars kind of turning the cheek and going in a different direction. The main thing is this: they have Jake Ottinger, who's been great in the AHL thus far, looks solid in his NHL debut in the playoffs, and I think this is a guy that could be a starter for the future. But you got Anton Khudobin, who was just signed to that 3-year deal at $3.33333 million, or whatever it was. So they have Anton Khudobin also locked up there. We saw how incredible and sensational he was in the playoffs. I don't think Khudobin will replicate that type of play because he also is 34 years of age. But Ben Bishop is a guy that I think with the playoffs that Khudobin had made Bishop more expendable. The thing is, though, Ben Bishop before this season, I think, was a top 5 goaltender in the NHL, at least over the past 3 seasons before this one. And if he has another rough season, has another inconsistent year, and is injured, if Ottinger goes up and is the backup and plays great, I can see the Dallas Stars trading him, getting some more cap relief, and maybe signing a better goal scorer for that forward group. It could happen. I'm not saying it will, but a guy like Ben Bishop, I think, is definitely more expendable than even I thought, and a guy that if he doesn't have a great 2021 season, could be out the door. And I'm just going to say this to stir the pot a little bit: I think he is perfect for the Carolina Hurricanes. But now we're going to go on to the 6th player who I see being traded in 2021. This is a move that I think is kind of inevitable, especially if this team misses the playoffs. That being from the Arizona Coyotes defenseman and Chicago Blackhawks legend Niklas Hjalmarsson. Now, Niklas Hjalmarsson would likely be a rental in this situation. He has 1 more year left on his deal at $5 million, but I do see it being a rental. The thing is, Arizona will have a little bit to work with in that Pacific Division. I see them either finishing 4th or 5th. They could miss the playoffs, but they could make the playoffs as well in a weird situation. But I still think Arizona is pretty much the same team we saw last year and could still be a playoff team. But the thing is, if Arizona's way outside the picture, they have quite a few options for potential rentals to give away. And I think Niklas Hjalmarsson is likely the most enticing. He still has a pretty good cap hit, so I think they would likely have to retain a little bit on that deal. But Niklas Hjalmarsson is still insane defensively. People often forget about him, but he's definitely one of the main reasons why Arizona is still so solid on defense. And he is still pretty old at the moment. He right now is 33 years of age, but I don't think he's past his prime in terms of what he does best, and he still does it exceedingly well. Offensively, obviously we've seen him decline a little bit, but in terms of the defensive game, in terms of the defensive shutdown ability he has, he's still insanely good. And for a team that needs a shutdown defenseman that can work on the penalty kill, he's pretty much the perfect addition. So I think the Arizona Coyotes could still get a lot for him as well, especially at this trade deadline, and he could be one of the most enticing guys around free agency and around the trade deadline as well this next season. And next up, we're going to go to the next forward, and the next player I see being traded in 2021 for the Philadelphia Flyers, big contract man, James Van Riemsdyk. Now, James Van Riemsdyk, again, in the 2018 offseason, signed a pretty major deal with Philly, and at the time, I really did not like it for the Flyers. Really liked it for James Van Riemsdyk because it paid him a lot, but for the Flyers, I thought it was a pretty massive risk, and so far, it's been weird because when JVR has played for the Flyers, he's been pretty good, but he has dealt with some pretty major injuries in his time there, and I think this is a player that likely will be moved, because he still has quite a bit of value on the market, and he's still been pretty good. I think he got 40 points in 66 games last year, which is very respectable, but at his cap hit right now of $7 million, he makes that for the next 3 seasons. I think this is a player that Philly could definitely afford to lose and likely will have to lose. The thing is here, I see James Van Riemsdyk likely being a player in the whole expansion draft system, and if he is left unprotected, I see the Seattle Kraken getting him. But I do see a situation here where maybe Philly works out a deal with Seattle. They take James Van Riemsdyk and they get something back. We'll see what happens, but I think Philly could get a little bit more creative in the situation there. If they end up trading him, then they likely do have 1 more slot to protect, so we'll see. But I think with Philadelphia, just in general, this is a guy that they don't exactly need right now. They have quite a few fantastic wingers, especially on that power play already, and I think this is a player that could get off the books and leave some pretty major cap space for Philadelphia to work with. Already on top of the Matt Niskanen cap space they already have. And we're going to go on to another forward here, but we're going to go on to a big-time center. Not a big-time center for his team, but a center that could provide a lot of value. You know, if he was a free agent this year, probably would have gotten a lot of money. Now, we're going to go on to Toronto Maple Leafs centerman, Alexander Kerfoot. Alexander Kerfoot is a really interesting player because I thought he was going to be traded this offseason. It was going to be a done deal. Toronto was going to get that cap hit off the books, but no trade happened. But I do think that he's pretty much the inevitable guy for the Toronto Maple Leafs to end up trading. He has 3 more years left in his contract at $3.5 million, and he is still a pretty young player at age 26, but this was a player that was looked at as a pretty major piece in the Nazem Kadri deal, and nothing has really come up from that. Alexander Kerfoot has been solid for the Leafs, but nothing absolutely spectacular, and he still has a lot of value, but this is a player that Toronto, especially with that cap hit, I think needs to lose almost. Again, at $3.5 million, that's not the worst thing in the world, but it is a pretty bad contract for the Toronto Maple Leafs specifically. And to get that contract off the books, I think would be huge for them. They already have some decent center options, and they brought some more in, like Joe Thornton, who could fill that role. But I just think in general, with what Kerfoot brings, it's just not enough for that contract right now. And even if he was worth that contract for the Leafs, I still think they would likely have to move him. We're now going to go to a player that, from the offense, we have Alexander Kerfoot. We're now going to go to a player that on the defensive core will likely be kind of the odd man out, that being Travis Dermott. To me, Travis Dermott is really kind of an underrated trade pick that nobody's really talking about too much, and to me, I think will likely be the guy that's moved. When it comes to the defensive situation for the Toronto Maple Leafs, he is a lefty, and they already have quite a few fantastic guys like Morgan Rielly and Jake Muzzin, and in terms of the lefties that they have, you obviously on the right defense side got TJ Brodie this last year, but you got Mikko Lehtinen on the lefty, you got Rasmus Sandin on the lefty, who will both be majorly fighting for that third pairing spot, and that leaves Travis Dermott, who was really just not good at all last year, and a guy that I think just in terms of the potential he brings is still good, but not quite what Toronto needs to really be a solidified spot on that left side third pairing. And we're now going to go to the final player who I think will be traded in 2021, and I think this is probably the hottest take I have. I know I had Ben Bishop, but this is a guy that I really don't see talked about at all when it comes to the trade talks, but if it doesn't go this team's way, I think will be the big trade that they end up making. For the Boston Bruins, I see them trading David Krejci. Now, I want to say this, that I know I predicted Boston to make the playoffs, and if they make the playoffs, I don't think they're trading David Krejci, obviously, and if they're in a position where they will make the playoffs, then at the trade deadline, I don't see anything happening. But if Boston is well outside the playoff picture, which, with the injuries of Marchand and Pastrnak, which I don't think will affect them too much, but if it really does affect them, and they get off to a terrible start out the gate, and it just doesn't really ever rebound for them, then David Krejci, I think, is the big trade they make. He has 1 more year left on his deal, so he would be a rental, but at the moment he makes $7.25 million. Age 34, and in 2019 got over 70 points, was still good in the 2020 season, but this was a guy that in terms of that 2019 season in the playoffs and the regular season was an absolute monster. And I think for a team that is in need for, or especially a second line center, could really use a guy like David Krejci. I know it's kind of crazy, but for me at least, I think the New York Rangers are the absolute perfect team for a guy like David Krejci. A fantastic playmaker, a guy that's been in the playoffs for so long, could really teach the young guys exactly what it takes and to win the Stanley Cup as well. To me, that's exactly, if I was the New York Rangers, who I'd want as the second line center. I don't really care at all about Ryan Strome. He's probably going to get traded as well. But if you get David Krejci, I don't even care how old he is now. He's still an effective offensive player, and still the leadership he brings can be a great fit on that second line. I think he'd be absolutely perfect for a team like that, but really any team that's in need of a top 6 center, I think Krejci would be a beautiful fit, even if it is just a rental at the end of the year. I think if the Bruins are outside the playoff picture, David Krejci is a likely trade option, and a guy that, yes, Boston I don't think would want to trade because he's been there so long, but at the same time is a guy that would still get a lot of value on the market, especially as that big time center a lot of teams could use. But that is going to be it for today, folks. Thanks so much for watching. Once again, join the 30% of people that are subscribed. Join the Grab Gang for more hockey videos just like this one. Make sure you comment down below, though, what do you agree and disagree with, and what do you see as the biggest players that will be traded in 2021. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell as well if you are new, and make sure you comment down below all your thoughts, share this video with your friends, get it out there, and click on this card for all my hockey trade videos right in one playlist. My name is Nathan. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video or stream. Goodbye.